My name is Melissa Sassi, and I think for any of you who've watched our series before, you know that I wear a lot of different hats. So I work at IBM, and that's my day job. I run a global startup program at IBM. I'm also a developer advocate, where I work with young people to bring them onto our technology and teach them about computer science and data science. I also am a founder. So I'm the founder of a nonprofit that's called Mentor Nations. We've got a IoT robotics lab and a co-working space in Tunis, Tunisia. So sandwiched in between Algeria and Libya. And we've taught tens of thousands of young people about computer science and data science in 12 countries. We've been nominated for a variety of UN awards. And, I personally sit on a UN task force that's all about empowering young women and girls through digital skills. I participate in a lot of different things with a lot of large organizations like the World Bank, where I'm a judge of a competition that is underway within that realm. I'm also the chair of the Digital Skills Working Group within IEEE. So the largest engineering organization on the planet, 400,000 members worldwide. And it's all about creating a standard for what it means to be digitally literate. I was on a call last week with a number of different thought leaders who are, focused on digital skills. And, it was really exciting to see the ITU, which is the IT branch of the UN, and a number of different organizations come together to talk about this idea of creating a standard for what it means to be digitally literate. Back in the beginning of 2019, I wrote a letter, a concept note to, as part of a submission to the UN high-level panel for digital cooperation, which is chaired by Jack Ma and Melinda Gates and supported by Vint Cerf, the father of the internet. And I'm really excited that many of my recommendations made it into a paper that the UN Secretary General created and launched as part of the initiative. So I just found this out within the last month or so, and it's been really exciting for me just to see my work culminate into something real and meaningful. But I think that, we'll talk a little bit about this particular session in a second, but, the focus of this particular session is we all have a lot going on these days, and that's work, that's professional, that's personal, it's, I think, also emotional. And, I felt like I've been off my game for the last month, which I have been, and I've been kind of like slowly trying to tread water like my dog in the swimming pool, and my dog hates to swim. So for me, I've been like this little dog who doesn't like to swim in the swimming pool over the last month. And I wanted to get us all together and really talk about the journey that founders go through when human stuff is happening. And how do you, maintain your job and your stature, and how do you maintain your side shimmies or your side shimmies that aren't so much side shimmies anymore, and still show up without kind of showing everyone that, oh my gosh, I'm in a tailspin. What do you do and how do you manage yourself? So with that, that's a whole lot. I'm going to pass it over to Doug to tell you a little bit about how Doug fits into it.
So hello, everyone. My name is Doug Winnie. I'm a partner with Melissa, Chief Learning Officer at Mentor Nations. Then I'm also Director of Learning Experience at H&R Block, a tax prep and financial services company in the United States. One of the things that I talk about is around moments of belonging and how mental health, mental awareness, mindfulness plays a really big part in creating moments of belonging. And there are three particular components that I like to think of when I think of these belonging moments. One is, how do you create moments for yourself, especially when you are no longer having the separation of work and home, where you are using a small little coffee table in the corner of your living room as your office, where you're trying to balance taking care of children or dependents that need you and your attention to be able to get through the day as you're trying to maintain a livelihood for them and for the rest of your family. But then also as a leader and for someone that manages people and are trying to inspire confidence in others, how do you create moments for them to feel that they belong and can bring their whole selves to work when their whole selves is working from home? And understand the need to blend the two of them together in a little bit more of an organic way than you might have done in the past. And then the other, which is something that I don't think is really considered much, is how do you create moments of belonging for your leaders that they're trying to navigate through all the same things that you're trying to do, plus the added weight of responsibility that is placed on them as they're trying to navigate through all this. So with that, I'd like to introduce Todd, who's our special guest for this particular session. Todd, could you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Hey, I'm Todd. I'm a recovering professor. I did that for many years after a PhD in organizational behavior at Texas A&M. Loved being a professor and then got lucky and found a second calling, helping people in a different way. So now I make courses for online platforms led by my favorite, of course, LinkedIn Learning, and give a lot of keynotes and write. So I think at this point, I've got something like 30 plus courses that have been viewed by nearly 40 million people in almost 200 countries in 7 languages. So
Holy smokes, look at you, baller.
that's a platform. I've been very, very lucky.
Yeah. And the thing I like about Todd is I remember in the beginning when we first met, bringing your whole self to work, which what's the title of your book?
The one you're thinking of is probably Show Your Ink.
Yes, and to bring everything you are at work. And we definitely had a bonding moment when we rolled up our sleeves the first time we met, and we were like, okay, we bonded on our ink. So yeah, so all good stuff.
Sure.
I'll just bring my bracelets.
There you go. Hey, you're bringing it to work. And then we also have Lala, who is our chief operations and product management officer. Lala, can you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Lella. I turned 16 on Wednesday. I'm based in the UK, and I've been working with the team, Melissa and everyone, to really ensure the content being created is dedicated for students and is actually what we're wanting. So I've just been nudging them and saying, yeah, this is what we need, and steering them in the right direction, which I think is really, really important, especially when, we are the future workforce. Yeah.
So I think it's really important to, I think when you look across the teams that you have, to really live that concept of diversity and inclusion. And since, we focus so much of our work on youth, I think having someone who is reverse mentoring us, I think a lot of times you think of someone who is, has X number of years more experience than you, or has a bigger job title than you, or whatever, as the one who can mentor you, versus thinking about actually, for us, Lela is our mentor, and I know that freaks Lela out most of the time, where she's like, wait a second, I don't know how to wrap my head around this. But, it's really important to think about, when you're building something, and when you're a founder, how do you make your team so diverse and inclusive that it aligns to, your customers or your users or your audience, and make up that team of people who really are your audience. And I think this kind of brings us to, the journey that we've been on as founders over the last month. I opened up about something last week, and I filmed the video quite a few months ago, and it launched last week, and it was launched by Microsoft's formal channels, so they're within their social media team. And I saw that a bunch of other Microsoft channels shared it over the last few days, and I didn't quite fully open up about everything that I struggle with, but I opened up and said, hey, I'm neurodiverse. And it really freaked me out after I saw it in video, and after I saw myself saying it to the world. And after seeing a lot of people reach out to me and say, I think I am too. And by you opening up, it helped me feel more comfortable to say, I am too. But it was really scary for me, thinking like, oh gosh, now my boss is going to know, and now my colleagues are going to know. And, you know, is there a stigma attached with that? And I felt a little bit also, you know, kind of like I left out part of the story as well. Like I didn't talk about how I struggle with depression and anxiety. And I felt like I included one aspect of what's going on, but I kind of left out the other two because I was still a little bit scared to come out and say that. And over the last month, you know, I've been struggling with that. I've been struggling to bring my whole self to work because I wasn't my whole self and I didn't know how to get myself back on track. You know, and I've been working with Doug to tell Doug, like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but up here's not going well. And it's hard to get out of bed. And it's hard to like do the things I need to do. Help me. You know, and it took a lot to just come out and say that, you know?
Sure.
And one of the things that I've been trying to do as a leader of others is to create a space and an understanding for my leader to understand the needs of the neurodiverse that are in this, and to be a good advocate for them, for those that might not feel that they are able to speak about these things, and to create an environment where discussion about it isn't only encouraged but welcomed. We want to have these discussions and to have a greater appreciation for that. So Todd, I mean, you know, you've mentored a lot of leaders. You've been, you know, providing, you know, coaching for leaders and trying to give people direction on where they're going. In the world that we're in right now, where does neurodiversity really play a larger role in the leadership makeup?
Well, I have I think a very important generic answer to that. Kudos to you, Melissa, for speaking so honestly. I mean, one of the things that I've gotten so much traction for in the last decade is the topic of authenticity. And that's the first thing that hits my brain when I listen to you give your little testimonial there, which I really enjoyed, because it's about you saying, I'm a human and here's a specific nature of, at least a little bit about the specific nature about how I'm human. That informs other people. Here's what you might not think of, because you mentioned the potential negative downside of doing that, the stigma. There are costs to anything other than sitting quietly at work. In fact, there's costs associated with that, the risk of not speaking up. But most people become risk averse and quieter. Long story short, on average, people like me preach proactivity and authenticity in relationships, because what we know, I mean with great certainty, is that even if you have some apprehensions about saying you're neurodiverse, or a million other things, of course, one might share, what we know is that on average, over time, high productive, high performing teams and quality leaders will see that as far more value added than a problem, period. And over time, people will reciprocate. And we tend to find much more candor about those types of very human issues in high performing teams than in lower performing teams. So all I would say in an immediate response to that intro is kudos for you for being so straightforward, because
I'm telling you, it was so scary. And even right now, when I just said, like, I suffer from depression, I suffer from anxiety, like, I even now, like, I'm like, you can't see my fingernails and what's happening to my fingernails down here, but I'm like I'm like this. And, you know, it's scary to, you know, admit something that is,
sure.
Yeah, it's scary.
There's no doubt about that. Absolutely, positively scary. And I make no bones about this. As a paid guru, I absolutely talk about what you talked about all the time: insecurities, ambiguities, times I failed, moments where I find a great deal of difficulty seeing a glass half full, etc. So I would say to you that it's not about a black or white. Do you do that level of honesty or not? It's about how honest it is. It's about how frequent, I have to admit this, it's about how frequent it is. If someone never talks about personal things ever, it's a weird, plastic, distant professional relationship. If someone does it every 5 minutes, they're strange and no one will enjoy them. But
I probably go down the line of strange and oh my gosh.
Melissa, in the presence of a huge assumption here, we hired decently. In the presence of decent people, quality talent, great standards, in that rough context, speaking up on occasion in a more unfiltered manner, just like you just did, is absolutely positively a catalyst. It does depend on the people and the context, I admit that, and frequency should be low to moderate, not high. Having said that, under those conditions, it is a value-added thing that not only helps you be understood, it helps others feel feel more human and quite likely to reciprocate as well. So kudos to you.
It was really kind of cool the other day where Microsoft for Startups shared the video. It's like a feature of my story and why I became an entrepreneur, why I decided to focus on digital skills. And Todd, this is something that you may not be aware of. I don't know, how much of a conversation you and Doug had about my personal story or how much you looked into my background, but the skinny of it is, more than 10 years ago, my children were kidnapped by their father, and they're safe and they're healthy and they're normal kids. I know where they are, but I did not get them back. And one day, my daughter was talking about, learning computers in her classroom, and I realized she didn't have access to her own computer, and it was one computer for all of the 40 kids, which is not something, unheard of even in the developed world. And so I set out on this mission to bring computers to her classroom. I ended up sending, through Microsoft and HP, 400 laptops to 20 schools, and, created this digital skills movement that later became what I consider to be, my life's work, and taking my worst nightmare and turning it into my superpower. And so this video that, Microsoft made was, all about my founder story. So, how did I take my worst nightmare, turn it into my superpower, and become a founder and create, some of the things that I have created so far in partnership with the team, and some of the things that we have to, that we're planning to do next. And when that video got shared by Microsoft for Startups, their chief technology officer responded and said, I think that I have this too. I think that I'm neurodiverse too, and I think I need to check it out. What path did you go on? And I looked at it and I thought, wow, a chief technology officer wants, advice from me. And I looked at him like, of course, I'm a founder as well. And I think there's this journey that we also all go on to, kind of recognize what is our secret sauce and what is it that we bring to the table, and how is it that we can take whatever that secret sauce is, whether it's, wow, I suffer from mental illness, or I suffer from this, or I live with this, and use that as a catalyst for others, both the bad stuff and the good stuff.
It's amazing how much people learn from your bad stuff if you will let them. So before I forget, quick aside for you and your listeners, some speaker friends of mine that have messages, almost all their platform aligns so well with what you were just saying. Dave Rendell and Mark Henson, you might check out, talking about using your deficits and downsides as, frankly, your biggest weapons, etc.
Dave
stuff.
Rendell, and what was the other one?
Dave Rendell and Mark Henson. Okay. Yeah, he's out of Columbus, good guy. I love that, and let me try and validate those thoughts by telling you that when I look at the tweets, the blogs, the stories on stage, the videos of mine that have done better than others, it's absolutely when it's in the spirit of what you were just describing about where you've been on that journey. For example, one of the most famous ever is a story about a time I gave a speech that went very, very badly. It was embarrassing as hell in front of a whole lot of people at a big corporate gig. State Farm, if you're interested. And I was not the pro that I thought I was, or that I definitely became, but I just wasn't. It was embarrassing. And again, not every 5 minutes, but a few times each year in the right context, when you are as forthright as you just were, for example, mentioning your children. I did not know that story. Thank you for mentioning it. Or me talking as a guy who's paid too much to speak, talking about a time I fell on my face, embarrassed, almost ran from the stage about 15 years ago.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that happens. And if you're lucky, which is the brilliant punchline that we all know so well, if you're lucky, you figure out how to turn those dark little moments into, frankly, some of the biggest springboards you'll ever see in your life. That's the
Hey, if Post Malone can fall down and get himself back up again, then so can Todd.
Okay, so what you're saying is I can get face tattoos. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, whatever works,
It works. Okay.
Gave him an opening. One of the things that I've had issues and bouts with depression before, so I'm definitely in the neurodiverse area. And while we're not medical professionals, and I'm not providing any medical advice for anyone out there, but one of the things that all of us as perceptive founders and leaders, how do we create that added perceptiveness and creating an environment for people to have those frank, authentic conversations is really important. So, what are some of the things that you look for maybe in yourself or in others And how do you create that environment for them to be able to talk about what could be going on, since a lot of conditions are medical status, and you really don't, in the United States, you can't ask them what their medical status is.
Well, it's interesting. You're correct. We're not a medical professionals. On the other hand, what I always tell people is your business is your business. But if you're going through things in a general sense and it's going to impact relationships in some predictable way and or clearly become on the radar of someone who's supervising you, helping them, again, being proactive tends to always be a great answer. Helping them understand where you are without specifics is absolutely in your best interest and very pro team and pro relationship with your boss. So it's not about divulging details per se. It's about letting people know I'm in a difficult place right now and I'm working on it, and that's what I'd like to share. And hey, are there aspects of the work today or this week that are more pressing than others, so I can have as clear as possible an understanding of expectations as I navigate back to normal, hopefully real soon. So that was a generic example of a way you can still try to keep people connected to where you are without divulging difficult things that you don't always want to.
I like how you said that, because, I think, when you're having to divulge something like that, it's one of those kind of classic crucial conversations around, like, what are the words that you use to maintain, maintain your composure? Because I think when you're opening up about something like that, it can be scary. It can make you, if you're a crier, it can make you want to all of a sudden just start crying, like, oh, no. I was very thankful that, as I've been going through my things, which I'm very thankful that I feel like I'm back onto the swing of things now. But, over the last month, when I, reached out to Doug and reached out to Lella and Sean and said, you know what, I'm not okay right now. I'm going to be okay. Let's put a pause on things. Let's still keep things moving. What can you pick up while I'm not okay? And it's a scary thing to admit, as a leader, as a founder, as a CEO, or even just as an employee. How do you come to others and say, hey, give me some time? I'm usually the one who's like full on all the time, working like a maniac. And
you, Melissa, never. Don't understand.
And so it's like I think for others probably like being waterboarded, like, wait a second, what do you mean Melissa's struggling? Melissa's like the one who's always on, and Melissa's the one who's always like full on. Like, what the hell?
I had the same situation happen at work, where I have this reputation of like, okay, just give it to Doug. Doug will get it done. Doug will get it done, all this kind of stuff. And then I felt this buildup of all this just stuff that I couldn't get my head around. I didn't have the focus. I wasn't able to do the deep thinking that I can usually do. And it combining with another thing, I started feeling like an imposter, because I'm like, okay, I've done like vision and strategy and all this kind of stuff, and I haven't had a chance to get my mind into any of this. So I am like lying. I am faking it. And that just made it feel worse. So I finally created a moment with my boss, and I said, I'm struggling, and I'm struggling for these reasons. The person that you put your trust in to do these things, the person you rely on to bring the empathy and the connectedness to the team, it's not happening. And when I was able to open up about these topics, his mindset shift so that he was more about, I don't want to talk about any of the tasks you're doing. I want to talk about you. I want to really figure out where you are and how I can help clear things out or give you the time that you need to be able to get your slot car back on its track to be able to go forward.
I love that you were able to talk to your boss in that way, because in my job, I was recently able to do the same thing. And I said to my boss, I'm not okay right now. I spent, the last year working 18 hours a day, even on the weekends. And I feel like I've been doing too much. And she was talking about it before me. So she could tell that I was on this cycle, and she'd been asking me to take vacation, because she was worried about me burning out. And I got to this point where I felt like, oh my gosh, I have burnout. And I'm very thankful that she said, you're hitting all your goals. You are a star. You just received, this award that only like 1 to 3% of all of, 300 and some odd thousand employees get. Like, we appreciate you, and we want to give you the time that you need to get back on track to what you feel comfortable with as a healthy pace. And I spent the month of June, I took a little bit of vacation. I ended up getting sick, which kind of sucked, which really, really sucked. I didn't get COVID. I thought I had COVID. I had dengue fever, actually, which I would never wish upon my my worst enemy. Perhaps that girl in high school who maybe her, maybe her, I don't know. But then I took a little bit of vacation, and I tried to balance, work a little bit more where I was still staying afloat, because I think also it's a scary time right now, because we see a lot of people losing their jobs.
Oh, yeah.
We see a lot of people getting, getting downsized for a variety of different reasons. And, the world has changed a lot, and nobody knows what's going to happen after this thing, And so it was very scary for me to go in on it and look at it like, hey, I admit weakness, like, I'm not perfect. I'm not a star, but maybe I'm a star sometimes.
That's actually quite classic. We like to think we're more enlightened than we really are sometimes. The whole evolution of leadership and relationships at work is relatively new. There's a classic error where leaders expect to help others feel confident by only showing what they know and showing clarity and conviction. That is to say, disavowing imperfections which all humans have. And that's actually a less than optimal approach. I didn't say it's wrong. I know we want to project confidence to make others feel confident. But it is true that if you do not go ahead and admit some of the things we're all kind of openly talking about it now as if it's easy, then people won't feel as connected to you as possible and as motivated. It's funny, we often think that hiding the worst parts of us is essential to having others be confident in us. It's actually not. It's essential that you use it in order to maximize your leadership long term. The question is, can you figure out the frequency, the words, the delivery that lets that reality about you create a better reality for the team?
Sometimes I have to write about it first. So I learned a journaling technique that Melissa and I, a shared friend of ours, Donna Sakar, has been using recently, and she taught it to me around how do you first summarize. Don't summarize yesterday, but talk about what its purpose was to you in your life.
Sure.
Then talk a little bit about, what's something you're grateful for, but then what are your 3 worries that you are dealing with today? And it could be about anything. It could be about family, it could be you, it could be your team, it could be a project. And then say, what is the purpose of the day that's about to happen? What I've been using is the journal entries that I've been writing as a way to kind of get thoughts out there. And then there's a tradition that happens at some companies like Facebook and others called the HPM, the highlights people in me, which is basically a written communication that goes out to your team that talks about highlights about what the team is doing, people that are making a real big impact, and then talking about yourself and things that are going on in your life. I use the me portion to talk about the things that I'm worried about. So it's because the worries that I have can then be opportunities for the team that have strengths that I might not necessarily have, or visibility that I might not be able to see, to help alleviate those worries as a collective group. And sometimes that includes mental challenges, dealing with, I've had some family members pass from COVID-19, just trying to deal with some of the emotional pulls and pushes that happen. And to really, I enjoy creating I enjoy being a vulnerable leader and having that be okay for myself and also for the leaders under me to cultivate with their teams.
Yeah, it's classic. Vulnerability is the word you used, and it's getting great play in a lot of books with a lot of personalities right now because it's universal, and we have denied it as a negative thing for so long. All kinds of social scientists and mental health professionals will tell you that it's actually a warm blanket that validates your humanity. You just have to figure out how to deal with it and then share it. So let me give you kudos on the journaling. I used to force MBA students. I taught MBA students for 10 years. I used to force them to do some journaling, and it always started like this: "You're going to make me do what?" Because they thought They thought I was making them, keep a diary or something. And by the end, they were sharing insights and describing benefits the way you were. And it was all, I mean, not universally, but tons of them. And it was so beautiful to watch adults claim ownership of space to think through some of the things we're talking about right now, because the more successful, busy, and educated we are, the less space we tend to give ourselves as we chase these allegedly important goals to think about core human issues about ourselves. So when I hear you writing like that, that just makes me so happy. We don't give ourselves permission to think about some of the most important core issues in our lives enough.
I've been and I haven't done a good job keeping track of it over the last month because it's just my headspace wasn't there. But I have this app, and it's like 3 good things, and it's like it only allows like a certain amount of space, and it prompts you every day. Lola's got it. Yeah, Lola's got it, and it's really simple, and you just put in like, what are the 3 good things that happened today, and it kind of. Yeah, it's really
3 days.
It's been a while since I put my 3 good things in there, which I'm going to start doing again because I feel like I'm back on the motorcycle again.
There you go.
Nice. There's an offline conversation about motorcycles we need to have as well. Anyhow, yeah, so it's funny when you ask yourself this question often, how am I doing? And everyone walks around at work, and this used to be true, and now it's radically true, and speaks to the theme of your program today. They used to think, how am I doing, and how is everyone else doing? We have a blind spot that's massive for the fact that everyone's experiencing something different than us, and very often it's negative and more challenging than we can possibly fathom, and we should appreciate that. And then you throw a pandemic on top of that, and here's the truth. Millions and millions of people are feeling like, I could be triggered and have my worst self come out so much easier right now than usual. Usually, I've got this reserve of I can take it and I can deal with it and I can get back to a good perspective, etc. That reserve is simply very, very low for massive numbers of people right now. So what I just remind people is, it's not a cliche. I'm glad we talk about it and people thus hear a cliche. Everyone's going through something. You want to talk about Leadership 101? If you paid me to do a workshop right now, I'd start with everyone is going through something, and it's hurting them in a way that's meaningful and that you don't understand. And we got to talk about what it means to respect that if you have any hope of connecting with them to build a relationship and get things done at work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've been doing an internal talk about, thriving from home, about strategies about how to work from home, because I work for a financial service. I mean, H&R Block. I mean, it is pretty old school. I mean, so we have people that have been working in the headquarter office for 50 years. Okay. So, the idea about working from home is completely foreign to them, but there's so many people that talk about it. It's like, oh, we're working from home. We're working from home. No, I'm living through a global pandemic and trying to work from home. So that's kind of the where I'm trying to set the expectation in terms of what people are going through. And that's, I think, to your point, Todd, it's like, everyone is going through this, and we just have to recognize that. So, I mean, with everyone going through this, are there routines? And I want to ask Lala first and see if she has anything that she's uniquely doing. Are there any routines that you've added to your life that kind of help you with your mindfulness, where you feel more centered? I mean, the three good things seems to be one. Are there others that you're using?
Yeah, since my exams got cancelled because of the pandemic, I've had like so much time to just reflect and things. And when I was in the midst of studying for my papers, I stopped doing yoga completely, but previously I was doing it every single day. That was my New Year's resolution for 2019. So I was practicing yoga all the time, and I'd journal and I'd do everything. So really reconnecting with things like that and using this time almost as a time of self-improvement and reflecting exactly what it is I want to achieve in the next couple of years. That's really what I've focused on over the past couple of months.
Okay. How about you, Todd? What have you been introducing into your day-to-day routine?
I mean, I think her comments really resonate. You do think about those small number of things that matter, and you use them as a mantra in certain ways. And then number 2, You reach out a little more frequently to people, just tiny touches. Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Because I am very sensitive to what we were just talking about, the fact that we're all doing something crazy and then going through something crazy. And then I think about that old political maxim, never let an emergency or crisis go to waste, which I think is insightful. And so I'm doing the best I can to very proactively use this as all right, the silver lining here is that I have the opportunity to pivot. What happens normally is that busy people go, there's 10 things I should probably think about doing next year, next 3 years. And then you hardly ever get to them because you're so busy doing what you're doing. And right now we just have so few excuses about trying to craft a pivot. That word's been used too much, but it's for a reason. And for me, for example, that's writing more. I got a new book coming out shortly called Live Hard. I'm very excited about. So it's writing more, and it's making a whole lot more content in general. I'll have a whole bunch of new courses coming out. So when opportunity for speaking, just as an example, one thing goes away, the question is, you've got that time, great. How can you use it to the best of your advantage? And I'm finding good answers to that tell me more and more about who I am as a pro and how I should use my time in the next couple of decades. So I hate to, it took me a while to say this, but it's an amazing blessing or opportunity to see how other hats feel, because we're being forced to try them on, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Every single day.
I feel like I've been, I've forced myself to be more open about, about my struggles. And this is something that I have made a point to try to embrace and not hide, because I feel like, so much of my life I have, hidden how I feel about this or that. Like I have this narrative that I use, and, okay, it's honest and true, but it kind of leaves out some of the vulnerability. And I've tried to introduce, more visible vulnerability, to myself, and allowing others to see things that maybe I wouldn't have allowed them to see, otherwise, and realizing that, hey, we're all, like you said, going through something. And, I have an opportunity to, share with others that it's okay to be vulnerable, even though it's scary. It's okay to talk about not being okay sometimes, and you can still maintain and advance your career and your life even when things are not okay.
At a bare minimum, you can go after relationships and make sure they're as solid and or growing as they need to be. So even when job opportunities are full of question marks, the relationship side of it's always there for you to work on, build on, and invest in. Absolutely.
I think it's also allowed me to weed out some stuff that, some stuff in some relationships that are, are not the healthiest, and that I don't need to foster and be a part of. And I think we often feel bad, when for whatever reason a relationship, personally or professionally, doesn't work out, and feel like, wow, did I do something wrong? Is it my fault? And sometimes it is your fault. And that's okay. That, sometimes you just have to pick up and move on, and okay, this didn't work out, and this is a failure. Is it my failure? Is it your failure? Who cares? Let's learn from that, and not repeat it again and continue to go back to the well.
Doug, we keep stepping on you. I apologize, but I gotta respond to that.
Yep, please.
Sorry, Doug.
I really like that idea. The truth is that you do have to get brutal, in my professional opinion, at assessing who you give yourself exposure to in life on any consistent or significant way. And I would never act rationally in ruling people out of your life.
Oh, I've learned that the hard way. Trust me, Doug knows that very well.
There's a time to draw a line and say that person's no longer worth my investment. I have been reasonable times 10, and they're sucking my energy, which is so precious, out of my life. I can't allow that anymore or invest in that. And there is a time to do that. And I like people to hear it. You're not supposed to do it quickly. You're not supposed to do it never. But there is a time, if you want to talk about offline or whatever, thinking about when pulling that trigger might make sense. I'm not of the opinion that we need to get 100% negativity from everyone all the time away from us. That's actually not true, even though a lot of people preach things like that. Negativity is part of what defines the experience of positivity. Negativity is part and parcel to critical feedback we all need on occasion, et cetera, et cetera. It is, however, about taking people who are dominated by it and unproductive with it, and not allowing them to have significant access to you and to affect this too often.
Or someone who's just not looking out for your best interest, and only invested in, themselves or their own their own growth and not necessarily there for you when you need them to be there for you.
So I mean, in our personal world, we have the ability of controlling these types of relationships a little bit more. In the professional world,
Isn't that for sure?
Yeah, how do you do that in the professional world where you are sometimes compelled to work with those that are not boosting you up, that are not giving you that opportunity to thrive, but you have to work with them? I mean,
it's not sometimes compelled. You are very often compelled to deal with people that if you weren't being paid to, you likely wouldn't be interacting with.
Oh, I've definitely been there.
Yeah.
That's not evil. That's just life. The question is, how productively do we deal with that? So here's the truth. The truth is that there's what you want to do in that relationship with a given person. Then there's what you should do. So let's think about that. How you feel often isn't what you should do because, and this is difficult, but this is the straight coaching answer. I have a limited amount of social capital at work. Social capital is what I think of as, the latitude to be frank, candid, and authentic and not worry about the consequences. We all have a limited amount of that based on our tenure, our personality, our track record, etc., our title.
You mean I can't go around punching people in the throat?
Melissa, you're in trouble if you got to ask that question.
No, I'm just kidding. I've never punched anyone in the throat.
I do have to tell you though, there are certain, the former tenured professor, if there are certain job contexts where you can almost get away with even that, but most places there will be severe consequences.
I'm just I joke about punching people.
You're being honest. You're being honest, and I love that. And I won't name names, but I can think of at least 2 people.
That list is going to grow.
So then the question is,
you are not on that list.
Good to know. You got to work together. In the face of those people, what do you do? And I honestly would say this, well, how much social capital are you willing to spend to scratch that itch, my friend? Because you have a finite amount, and when you spend it, it may or may not get you the benefit that you want. And then you got to spend a lot of time earning more of those credits, if you will. So you really do have to get strategic at work, Doug, to your original question, about where do I spend my limited capital addressing these problems that I see in relationships around me or negativity, etc. And this is no fun to share, but it is smart advice. There's a minority of the things causing you problems at work where you should go get invested in changing that situation because you cannot win them all. I don't like saying that, but if you throw it out there.
No, but it's true. Like, you're going to get along with everyone. Not everybody's going to like you. And you may have done your best job, and there may be one individual who's going to find a fault in everything that you do because that person might be, their MO or their personality might be the devil's advocate, and that's just how they think and how they operate. And I know I've worked with, individuals who, do tend to look at things more critically and always looking to break things apart and, find the weakness in it. And that's just how they operate. And it's hard for me to work in that environment because I often see the world through rose-colored glasses.
Oh, no.
Maybe over the last month, not necessarily, but otherwise, yeah. And, recently I had a talk with my boss at, my day job. And I said, I'm really struggling with, this particular situation. And I know it's because we're polar opposites in terms of, how we communicate, how we see the world, and it's kind of like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And I really struggle when I'm working in this kind of environment. And she's like, in my mind, she's like, I can see that because I see your personality and I see how you are. And, these are the 3 would recommend, that person wants structure, that wants data, that person doesn't want to ask you for structure and data, that person wants you to bring it. And, you're kind of coming, that person doesn't know what to expect when you sit down with that individual because you're an idea generator and you're sitting down saying, oh, what if we did this and this and this and this? And that person's like, well, wait a second. This isn't, there's no structure every time we sit down and talk. So I think there are often these little things that you can do to manage, different personality types that might be, different different than you, or my values, or the way that you operate in,
No, it's
in
great.
terms
You're
of
never going
how
to
do I
be a perfect
suggest?
fit. You won't be a perfect fit with almost
No.
anyone. And I love telling people like Lola, hey guys, you might find high fit, or what people like me call high fit, where the relationships kind of on average over time feel comfortable and productive. That's great, but none of them will feel perfect full time. And having that expectation is going to make you very, very unhappy adults. I've said many times, work ain't nothing but adult daycare. Let's be honest. If you hated high school, or what we call high school here in the States, man, work it might surprise you just a little bit, because those times where you feel like you fit with people and those times where you just don't fit at all absolutely carry through into adulthood and professional life. The difference between the successful and the average very often isn't about IQ. It's about how well we choose to embrace what she was just saying and learn to navigate it effectively, given that limited social capital that I was talking about.
Plus, you don't have to have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at lunch.
Hey, I'm all about pizza day.
So Todd, I mean, as someone that's taught like MBA students that have obviously gone into leadership positions at existing corporations versus those that have done their own thing, became founders, have become entrepreneurs, is there something that unique between the two of them that you could say, that you could distinguish between the two of them around mindfulness and how they look at neurodiversity and other components, or are they basically the same?
I see him actually, this might surprise you, is more similar than dissimilar on that issue. I've seen it high and low in terms of overall mindfulness, for example, high, or ability to self-analyze, self-reflect, all these related notions. High and low, both for the corporate types, high and low, both for the entrepreneurs. The major, and there's a bunch of literature on this, the major differentiating factor tends to be their risk aversion, how they're oriented in general towards risk, how much they have a need for control, how well they process and deal with ambiguity, their need for achievement and recognition. For entrepreneurs, we tend to deal with ambiguity better. We tend to want more control. I feel more comfortable working for myself than being a cog in a machine, et cetera. So there's some well-known differences. On that mindfulness thing, I don't see a radical one has it, one doesn't, but it's obvious that those on both those camps we were just drawing who are higher do perform better. And the short answer as to why is that it's a combination of being more in tune with who you are and how you feel no matter what, and how others react to you when you embrace that mentality, when you build that skill, because it is a skill. And on average, people tend to gravitate towards and feel more comfortable towards more balanced, honest, open, occasionally authentic and imperfect human beings. So whether you're talking corporate or a small startup, the question is, when will someone listen to you and what you need as a supervisor, as your supervisor, right? And you're asking for creativity, change, improvement, a project with a big deadline, a client to be tantalized, whatever it is you're asking. The question as to how you perform is how much this isn't always fair, but it's true, how much I feel comfortable with you, how much I understand and believe in you. Not just how clear your instructions or expectations were. Now, I'm not saying that's fair. I'm saying that's how humans tend to operate, which is why all of this mental health and soft side stuff we're talking about long-term tends to be far more important than simple equations that involve only work ethic and only IQ. Those are just a foundation.
Hey, Lala, one thing that you and I were chatting about offline is around transparency and showing your truths, and around that authenticity that a leader, whether that is a instructional leader like you might have in a classroom, or just other leader that around what you might be doing outside of the class. I mean, how do you and how do others that you work with see that?
Yeah, I think recently I actually participated in a high school program for all about entrepreneurship and building an idea and what goes into like running a startup and things like that. So in that, it was, like you were saying, really equation centered. It was all the hard skills, what you had to develop. So actually hearing like what I call my mentors and like people in industry explain and be so transparent about mental health and about the struggles you face, and prove that it's not always blue skies. I just think that's so important, almost more important than building the skills, knowing how to like, what's it called, like emergency problem solving, if you like, how you solve those kind of problems. I think that's kind of more important than just, oh, this is what you need to do to become a millionaire. This is what you need to do to be a successful businesswoman. It should be more, if you do have a bad day, don't beat yourself up about it. It's a slow process, and this is what you need to do to recover, instead of just making it like it's all blue skies. So that's kind of my point of view.
I think it's, we just recently, I think, got to this place over the last couple of years where, I think, companies are starting to pay attention to, accessibility needs, whether that's, someone who might not, and I think it goes beyond mental challenges or emotional health or, emotional intelligence. And I think it's gotten us all at this place where we can, talk about and admit in a more open environment than before. But I think we still have a lot of room to grow. There are a lot of people I know who don't bring their full selves and don't know how to, share some of the struggles. When I worked at Microsoft, I did this personality test that a lot of Microsofties do, where you look at what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses and how well do you work with others, and, of certain personality types, and which personality types do you work better with, and, what are some strategies that you can use when you're working with, people who might be opposite, of you in terms of how they work, how they think, how they, what their values are. And one of the things that they looked at was how are you outside of work versus inside of work. And it was like this trajectory to show, and for me, I'm very open. And so what you see is what you get. And when you know me personally, that, and you know me professionally, it's the same. There's like a little bit of a difference in terms of personally what I hide, versus what I have, what I bring professionally. But what was very interesting for me was looking at the individuals where they were massive differences. And what was interesting is those individuals who had this massive difference, I didn't necessarily like. I didn't really get along with them. And I didn't know why I didn't get along with them. And I realized it was authenticity.
Sure.
It was vulnerability. It was knowing them as a real person versus it just being about work, goals, deliverables.
Melissa, I'll say it even more crudely. You're far more eloquent. I got to tell you, none of us were trained to be actors in professional life. And yet we all seem to be doing a lot of acting. And what you're saying in some level is, you don't think they're great actors. And that's no fun to watch a bad actor, is it?
No.
The reason why I'm glad I did some theater in high school.
But the weird thing about it was like, I had this spidey sense, where, I had the spidey sense of some of those individuals. And then when I saw their charts, it was like, oh.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know why. And they all had the common characteristic. And it was like, oh, okay. I value authenticity. I value vulnerability. I value openness.
Not everyone does. So
not everyone does.
There's research to back you up there. The average person can sense, for example, insincerity a mile away. And what you were describing at some level could be described as you sensing an insincerity.
Spot on. That's another word that I didn't think about, but insincerity.
It's something that I've been coaching executives on recently when they're giving virtual presentations. It's the difference between theater and cinema. We're now presenting in cinema versus theater. So your sincerity, your authenticity is within the camera lens. And it is way harder to sell it and be authentic when you're going to a lens versus to a large audience where things or other things to distract their focus or things like that. And Todd and I know that, because that's being in the LinkedIn Learning Studios. It's just like, it's like the camera, it's staring right into my soul.
Well said.
So, yeah, it can be rough. It can be rough.
Well, I will say that I'm a big fan of Todd, and you've given me, I think, some sound bites and some snippets, and also kind of validated some of the things that I was feeling, but still feeling a little bit scared and wary. And, I think you've given me, I certainly have confidence, but you've given me a boost of confidence. I will say that I have a high level of anxiety today because I said a lot of things that, are very open and out there, and I can't take back, they're there. And you've given me this space to feel like, hey, it's okay. You can still, be an and, you can have this and you can still be a leader. You can struggle with this and you can still be a rock star.
You just made my day, and it's just so important to have people hear this. The people that really, really, really achieve absolutely aren't the great thinkers, the ones who never talk about all the things you've been talking about. They're the ones who learn to talk about them effectively, or most effectively, because that helps others, which is why in the end, teams always trump individuals. So the question is, how do you get a team there? And it starts with people being brave in the basic, useful, beautiful ways that you did in this conversation.
Well, wrapping this all up, I just want to express my gratitude to you, Melissa, for having that voice and to saying and being that vulnerable person, because I think for every leader that has a chance to interact with that, with your story and to help people share, it's creating more opportunity for people to feel comfortable about being themselves and being authentic and being their true selves at work. Todd, thank you very much for coming today. Always awesome to hear from you. And Lala, thank you so much for participating and helping us understand more about the authenticity and how that works. So,
no, thank you. And I think it's so important that you're doing what you do, and hopefully you're pioneering for change, because we need more open and honest conversations like these.
Well said.
Awesome.
Todd,
Thank you, everyone.
Todd, anything you want to wrap up with?
No, I appreciate you having me, and keep these topics alive in conversation, guys.
All right, awesome. All right, so we'll have another episode of the XTP Hustle coming up soon. This has been definitely our let's get the gang back together.
It's like our hit refresh, right?
This is our hit refresh, and we'll get back after our brief hiatus and get back to our normal run of show. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.